welcome to Tub Talk episode 2 with me, your host, Emerald. I am so excited about this episode of Tub Talk, and let me tell you why. Tonight, I'm starting a 3-part series on cultural appropriation. I know it seems like a heavy topic, and it is, but it's one that's really important that we really need to talk about and get some of our facts straight, because sometimes I feel like we have a dialogue and none of us really know what we're talking about. So, as always, I'm in my tub, I've got my drink. Tonight instead of wine, drinking a little beer, a little wine and kugel, a summer shandy, because it is hot in North Carolina, let me tell you. But I'm still ready, I'm here, and I have lots of opinions as always. So, let's start sipping. Alright, so our top story tonight is the speech that Jesse Williams gave at the BET Awards last Sunday. I'm sure at this point, everybody's either heard it or read the transcript of it. If you haven't, please do so. It's phenomenal. There are a couple things that I want to go over about the speech, and then I'll kind of get into the cultural appropriation part of it, okay? So first, let's be really clear here, America. Just because somebody criticizes police brutality does not make them anti-police, okay? At one point in the speech, Jesse said, you know, Tamir Rice would have been 14 years old today, but unfortunately he was gunned down in the street playing with a toy as a child, and the police officer who shot him got to go home and live his life as normal. And that's simply not okay. And I think everybody who was watching this, I hope everybody who's watching this feels like that's not okay. Just because he said that does not make him anti-police. Just because I criticize something that I love, that does not make me anti that thing, okay? I think it was James Baldwin. James Baldwin at one point, he said, you know, I love America more than any other country in this world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. Meaning, because I love something, because I'm so dedicated to something, because I want the best from something, I get to criticize them. I love my husband. For those of you who know me, for those of you who don't, I do. I love my husband more than anybody in this world. And I criticize him. Not because I'm anti my husband. It's because I want better from him sometimes. It's because sometimes I know that he can do better for me and for our family and for himself. The same thing with our police, okay? We respect our police. We understand that their job is hard. We know they put their lives on the line. But we also know that they're there to protect us, and we want more and better from them. So by holding them accountable for their actions does not make us anti-police. It simply makes us want accountability for the fact that people's lives are being lost. So let's stop it with this whole, if you say anything about the police, you're criticizing them and you're anti-police. That's just not what it is, okay? And that's not what Jesse was doing. Jesse was saying, we deserve better from you. Okay? Secondly, and this is just kind of overall, throughout his speech, he gave lots of little nuggets of wisdom. It was very poetic. Everybody was like really excited and jazzed up about it. And I think that that's fantastic. But I've also noticed that we have a tendency to get jazzed up about something and then kind of let it fall by the wayside, you know, within the week, within the 2 weeks, right? I don't want that to happen for us. This speech really ignited a fire in our community, in our allies, and I want us to take this passion and mobilize this. I mean, he really got up there and was reminiscent of civil rights activists and leaders of the 60s. And I want us to take that, and I want us to start mobilizing ourselves, our allies, and start making some progress in this society. And one of the first things we can do is to register and get out and vote. Please, young people, register and get out and vote. But we need to mobilize this and use our power, as Jesse so eloquently put, that we have to make systemic change in our country. Okay? So, third, we're going to talk about cultural appropriation. And there was a part in his speech that Jesse gave that I'm going to try to paraphrase. I'm going to try to get it right, so bear with me here. He basically said that people are burying black people out of sight and out of mind while extracting our culture, our dollars, our entertainment, like oil, like black gold. They're ghettoizing and demeaning our creations, then stealing them and gentrifying our genius. Okay? This is the crux of what I'm going to talk about tonight and for the next 3 episodes, okay? Cultural appropriation is something that happens, and it's a real thing, and while I do not believe that there is ill intent in cultural appropriation, it is harmful to the culture that's being appropriated, all right? There's a law professor at Fordham University. Her name is Susan Scafidi, I do believe. And she told Jezebel, the publication Jezebel, that cultural appropriation is essentially when a majority group takes the intellectual property or traditions or knowledge or cultural expressions or artifacts from a culture of a less privileged or minority group without their permission, without their understanding, or without their acknowledgement. And that can be dance, that can be music, that can be dress, that can be folklore, medicine, anything, right? Usually this exploitation of that culture results in the gain of money or status for popularizing that piece of culture, okay? So let's think about that for a minute. If we think about that description of cultural appropriation, the example I can give is that of any of that Kardashian-Jenner clan, which I hate to even mention, but they appropriate culture, so I'm going to mention them. They're always, in box braids or in cornrows, and they're on Instagram and on covers of magazines, making this trendy and fashionable, and this is this new hip thing you can do with your hair, and they're getting all this press about popularizing this style, when really, this is something that's been going on in communities of different ethnic backgrounds for forever, and particularly in the black community, okay? You see in lots of urban areas, black men walking down the street with cornrows, black women cornrow their hair in the summer, and they get deemed ghetto or thug-like, but then, when Kylie Jenner puts it on, it's trendy, it's fashionable, it's fun, it's fresh, it's clean, okay? And then she doesn't speak up about it, right? She doesn't say, actually, guys, time out, because when this person does it, you call it ghetto, but when I do it, it's cool. Like, she doesn't use her platform to speak up about it. That's cultural appropriation. I want to make sure that we understand that that's a thing, okay? Secondly, there's a thing called cultural misappropriation, okay? So cultural misappropriation is essentially the same as cultural appropriation, except for somebody has been told explicitly to stop doing what you're doing, okay? I'm going to give you some examples. One is a serious example, the other one's kind of funny, but true. So, the Boy Scouts of America, they do this thing where they do like Native American dances around fires. That's part of like their little, their tribe, their groups, like initiation, their practice. And Native Americans across the United States have basically said, please stop doing these dances. You're just dancing at night around a fire. You have no understanding, no reality in what that means for us, what the tradition is there, how that's a religious practice for us. You're just doing it because it seems cool and it's something that you can do within your troops and within your groups. They have been told explicitly to please stop doing that, right? Another example is Iggy Azalea, and I say it's funny, but it's true, right? She came out here, she's on the hip hop scene, she's rapping, and frankly, she was pretty shit at it, right? Like, she sucked, and black people and people of the hip hop community, black, white, otherwise, basically like, please stop. Everybody was like, stop doing what you're doing because you're awful. You don't know what's going on. You don't understand, you don't understand the history behind it. You don't acknowledge where you got it from, and you're just awful. So please stop. Like, she was explicitly asked, I'm sure by millions of people, to stop doing what she was doing. So when somebody steals a piece of a culture and then is explicitly asked to stop doing that, that's cultural misappropriation, okay? The third one that I really want to highlight is cultural hobbyist or hobbyism, okay? So this one is kind of described, it's described very specifically as somebody, and particularly in the Native American culture here in the United States, or excuse me, in North America, but somebody who uses their ancient artifacts, their tradition, and and looks at parts of that without making the connection to the modern day plight of that group of people, right? So when you're looking at Native American headdress, you're trying to understand, you know, the significance of that over the past however many hundred years, but you're not talking about the alcoholism or the domestic abuse that's plaguing the Native peoples in our country. You're just trying to look at like that past part. That's cultural hobbyism. Basically nitpicking, cherry picking parts that you want to pay attention to and disregarding other parts, right? So after Jesse Williams' speech, Justin Timberlake tweeted out, you know, a message saying that he was moved, which is great. And then he was called out for appropriating our culture, the black culture. And I think when I look at the definitions of cultural appropriation, cultural misappropriation, and cultural hobbyist, I would not say that Justin Timberlake has appropriated the black culture. I would say that Justin Timberlake has a cultural hobby of the black culture, okay? When you talk about cultural appropriation, again, you talk about without permission, without acknowledgement, without understanding. I mean, the fact that these black producers are working with him, that we give him accolades based off of his music in the black community, that we, you know, go to his concerts, buy his albums, support him. We've given him permission to use our culture. He acknowledges that his idols are Michael Jackson and Prince and James Brown and Marvin Gaye. He understands that this music has come from these people. So with that being said, while yes, he is resulting, you know, his results happen to give him fame and fortune, which is great for him, he's not exploiting it. He's giving credit where credit is due for the most part. However, what he's not doing is relating the fact that our music is changing and our community has changed. And so while I don't believe that Justin has appropriated our culture, I do believe that he is making it a hobby of his. He has cherry-picked what he wants to take part in. He sees this music, he sees this fun part, he sees the dance, he sees the fashion, sometimes the vernacular, and he takes that and that's what he uses, right? He doesn't want, you know, the voter suppression part of it. He doesn't want the part where we're marching in the streets screaming hands up, don't shoot. He doesn't want the parts where we are burying, you know, our sons and our daughters. He doesn't want that part, and he doesn't acknowledge that our music is actually growing and maturing in a way that is now reflecting that part. When you look at artists like J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar, and even, you know, the newest Beyonce album, like, people are changing, and our musical culture is changing in that way. But he has nitpicked it. He has made himself a hobby of what our music used to be and what he thinks it should be, and has melding that into his own music. So, and I know that last part is what I think people are going to disagree with me about. But as I said, I've done some research this week, and I was really going to come into this and say, this is what cultural appropriation is. You know, Justin Timberlake, you know, you really done did it now. But as I started to learn, he doesn't appropriate our culture. He just has made it a hobby of his. Neither one, well, that's not true. Cultural appropriation doesn't necessarily have ill intent. But cultural hobbyism can be very bad for the community. So can appropriation, but hobbyism in particular, because it means that you're not taking into account the fact that the culture you're borrowing from is in pain, is suffering. You know, you look at Justin Timberlake's Twitter feed, his Instagram, and there's nothing about the Black Lives Matter movement. There's not, even if it's not that, nothing about, you know, the fact that there is something happening in the black community, and we're hurting and we're in pain. And for him to be borrowing from it, he's not speaking out on it. So, for everybody who was jumping down his throat saying that he was appropriating our culture, I disagree with you. I don't think he was. He's made it a hobby of his, and he'll use it to his advantage. And that's still enough to be pissed off about. Please believe I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm just trying to make sure that we have a distinction about what it is and what's going on. You know, time runs out. I try to keep them short because I want to keep your attention. And like I said, we have 2 more parts to this series, but I do want to leave you with this. I was talking to my aunt today, just trying to get her perspective on cultural appropriation and some of these artists. And she said, you know, a really good example is, so I'm sure you all, many of you have seen the movie The Devil Wears Prada. It stars Meryl Streep and Anne Hathaway. And so the character that Meryl Streep plays, she's like the editor of like this big fashion magazine. Her name is Miranda Priestley. And Anne Hathaway plays this character named Andy. She's like an intern. She's not really into fashion. And so at one point, you know, Andy, she walks in there and she's just like, I'm not really interested in what's going on. She doesn't say it, but that's just kind of how she's acting. And she's wearing this blue sweater and, you know, she's like, whatever. So a question's asked and she kind of scoffs. And Meryl Streep, Miranda Priestley, looks at her and she's like, you think you're better than this? She goes, you think you just picked out that outfit on your own and you're original because you picked out that outfit? And she goes, actually, let me tell you the history of this. Let me tell you how many people have thought about this color, which is not just blue, it's cerulean. Let me tell you how much blood, sweat, and tears have gone into making this something that's important in the world. Let me tell you about, you know, how people have slaved away and thought about what this could mean in this community, this fashion community. Basically, you think you made this decision on your own. You think that you're something new, that you're going against the grain, outside of the box. Well, honey, this has been done and it has been picked out and you are nothing special. That's cultural appropriation. Go find that clip because everything she says is basically what cultural appropriation is. Thinking that you're doing something brand new, taking credit for it, thinking that you have your own identity, that you're special, and not realizing that there is a whole history that comes before you regarding whatever it is you're wearing, saying, doing, singing, dancing, dressing, tasting, whatever it is. There's a whole history and culture behind it. That's cultural appropriation. All right, I'm done. Two more episodes where I'm going to talk about cultural appropriation. It's going to get good. We're going to give some more examples of what it really means. We're going to look at some other, you know, communities where this is happening with cultural appropriation. We're going to have some guests come up. I'm really excited about it. And as always, you guys, thanks for watching and keep sipping. I'm out.